Hey y'all, I'm Derek and welcome back to My 2 Cents for the Discount Bin. For those of you who don't know, this is a show where I go to a purveyor of DVDs, I peruse the discount bin, I find a movie at random and tell you what I think about it. Before we go any further, I'm sorry if you hear my air conditioner hum. I usually turn it off when I'm recording, but it is hot as a mug outside right now. Okay, so last week we took our first view of the Maneater series triple feature. And I was not too happy about it. My Eye of the Beast was just terrible. But I still got 2 movies to see if I made my money back. So I think we're going to look at Swamp Devil this time. It stars Bruce Dern. And if you don't know who Bruce Dern is, he's one of those actors who's in everything but you never really pay attention to him until somebody points him out and you're like, oh, I've seen him in that. He actually played an admiral in one of my favorite movies of all time, Down Periscope. Okay, since last week was so terrible, I actually came prepared this time. So, yeah, let's pop this in, see what we got. That was actually a lot of fun. Okay, so the basic idea behind this movie is, what if Swamp Thing was a psychopathic killer? That's about it. The movie is set in Vermont because, you know, when I think of swamps, I think of Vermont. Vermont, come for the maple syrup, stay for the swamps. It starts off 17 years in the past, where this preteen girl is walking through the forest in this Victorian nightgown and is pulled off screen, so we come to the conclusion that she was killed. Then it jumps through modern times and there's a girl running through the forest and she's yelling, help me, with this huge posse trying to find her, and they can't seem to find her even though you can tell that they're only like 10 feet away from her. That's when I start having fun with this movie because of the obvious tropes that they're throwing at you, and they know they're throwing obvious tropes at you. Like, there's the cars that won't start, there's a car explosion, there's bad acting, sophomoric acting. It's not as bad as Freshman, it's just a little bit more cynical. The girl who's being chased through the forest, she dies, and everyone blames this guy named Herbert. Then we cut to Melanie, who is our lead for this movie, and she gets a phone call from a kid named Jimmy who says she needs to come back home because her father's sickly and dying and he doesn't know how much longer he has, etc. It would have been better if he wasn't trying to seduce her over the phone. I mean, literally, he is laying a lot down on the line, if you know what I mean. Well, so she decides to come back home, and he meets her at the city limits line. And that's creepy. I'm sorry, this guy is not endearing, he's creepy. But she's falling for him like he's someone you can trust, and I don't understand why. 'Cause he's just creepy. Once she picks him up in her car, he comes clean saying that it's not her father's dying, her father's wanted for murder. And then, because she has a headache, he takes Melanie to a diner where this woman named Shelley works. She's being set up as a witch because she just touches her and her headache goes away. So Jimmy takes her to her father's cabin, then leaves her. At which point we actually see a group of vigilantes in the forest. One is off by himself and he gets killed by the Swamp Devil. And the Swamp Devil is an ent. Literally, he is a poorly rendered ent. It's hilarious. Then we jump back to the cabin, and Melanie all of a sudden is confronted by the sheriff's deputy and the sheriff, and she's like, no, I'm Herbert's daughter. I'm here trying to find my dad, and Jimmy's here with me. And everyone's like, who's Jimmy? So you know something's up with Jimmy, because if this is like a town of 20 people, and if the sheriff don't know you, he ain't from around there. Then Jimmy comes back, but he leaves in the morning before she wakes up, and the sheriff comes back and drops off the deputy. He goes off to try to find Herbert, the supposed killer, and he finds Jimmy on the side of the road. And at this point you can tell they're really setting Jimmy up to be the villain because of his character development, the way he talks. It's obvious. And I was right. After a few more deaths, Jimmy takes Melanie out into the woods, and they find Melanie's father, who holds a gun up to Jimmy, and Melanie's like, "No, Dad, don't. He's a friend. I know you're crazy." And Herbert goes, "He's no friend, and I ain't crazy." And then Jimmy turns into the Ent. They run away. Herbert tells Melanie the backstory. He used to be the sheriff in town, and the cutscene from the beginning of the movie was actually a little girl who was killed, and Herbert was pretty sure that Jimmy was the one who did it, but he couldn't get a confession. So he created this posse, and they took Jimmy out into the woods and basically beat a confession out of him, and then the posse beats Jimmy to death and then throws his body into the swamp. And apparently that gives him magical powers. Hey, it worked for Swamp Thing. Well, at this point, Jimmy kidnaps Melanie. That's to draw Herbert out of the house. So Herbert, this one guy who thought Herbert was the killer, but later found out that it wasn't him, and the sheriff's deputy, the only three people in this town apparently still alive other than Shelley, they all go after Jimmy. They figure out that Jimmy can't leave the city limits. Well, they free Melanie, and then they end up getting rid of Jimmy by Melanie and the deputy driving outside the city limits, having Jimmy follow them. And then Herbert comes in another car and hits him with the car and throws him over the city limits, and he just bursts open into a giant glob of mud. And yeah, that should be the end, but then they have this little thing at the very end where Shelley goes to the swamp and resurrects him because she's the witch, remember? Technicals. It's actually shot very intelligently. It is shot like a made-for-TV movie again, so I'm thinking that all these movies were made for TV to begin with. This one is just much more put together. It feels more like an actual movie. Yeah, I don't really have any problems with the technicals, other than the CGI rendering on the monster. It looked like a comic book. It literally did. But I have no problems with it. It was actually enjoyable. It wasn't like Eye of the Beast, which was just a slog. It was a bit of a slow movie, but I can understand why, because they had to put a little bit of drag in the story to make it 90 minutes long. So yeah, I would say that this movie particularly actually gives me my $7 investment back, because I did enjoy it. Is it going to change the world? No. Is it a overall scary movie? No. It's just a good way to kill 90 minutes. Really, that's about it. But we still got one more, so let's see how that one turns out. What do y'all think? Have y'all seen this movie? Did you like it? Did you not like it? Why don't you leave me a comment and tell me what you thought about it? So yeah, that's my thoughts on Swamp Devil. Nothing major, nothing going to change the world, but it's a fun little lark. Well, thanks for stopping by, thanks for tuning in, and come back next week when we finish off this triple feature with Black Swarm. Bye.